Good evening, everyone. This is the Oldest Story Neighborhood Association's monthly meeting. I'm Richard Kuzami, and thank you for joining us. We have an interesting event coming tonight focused on both healthcare and Roosevelt Island. We are very lucky to have with us the Director of Health Legislation, Dory Finney from the Office of Congresswoman Ocasio-Cortez. And then we also have, regarding the history of Roosevelt Island, Nate Gray from the New York City EDC, and Dylan Brown from the Historical Society of Roosevelt Island to give discussions on that. Before we start, on a little local basis, the biggest news that we've had recently is that both the Variety Boys and Girls Club and the Astoria Library on Astoria Boulevard and 14th Street will be undergoing extensive renovations. They will be closing within the next month, and frankly, they will not be reopening until 2029. There are contingency plans being made, so you can reach out to the library or Boys and Girls Club phone number, and they will tell you what the contingency plans are. The Variety Boys and Girls Club will now become a 5-story structure, the largest Boys and Girls Club in America, complete with swimming pools, planetariums, theaters, an ice rink. A lot's going on there. And then the library, which is over 100 years old, a Carnegie Library, it will have accessibility changes to it. It's never been accessible. We're finally going to make it accessible to all local people. So again, contact these people for alternative uses, places to go, and it's in the long run, it's something that's been needed for ages in this area. So, okay, the first, our guest, we'll be discussing health legislation for our area. I'd like to bring up Dory Finney. Hello, Dory.
Hi, Richard. Thanks so much for having me.
Good. And Dory, could you give a little introduction to yourself and your position?
Yeah, of course. So Dory Finney, health policy advisor for Congresswoman Ocasio-Cortez. So I'm based in her Washington, D.C. office. So I cover all her health policy legislation as, it takes place here in Congress. One thing that's important to note, I think, about the Congresswoman for this year is that she was appointed to the Energy and Commerce Committee, which is one of the most powerful healthcare committees in Congress. And so I cover, I assist with her on a lot of that committee work.
Very good. And I guess we have two main subjects we're going to address. One is the Affordable Care Act subsidies, which are in the news, and also telehealth issues. Can you explain clearly what the Affordable Care Act subsidies are, who they were originally designed for to help, and how they've evolved over time, especially with the expansion that came during COVID?
Yeah, of course. So just to back up for folks, the Affordable Care Act, the Patient Protection and Affordable Care Act was signed into law in 2010 by President Obama. And that legislation, it was quite difficult to get passed into law and to develop, but it was a major revamp of our healthcare system. And the goals of the legislation were to provide more affordable health coverage to folks. So the idea was, there are some concerns that folks have raised about the Affordable Care Act. I think one of those is that the Affordable Care Act itself did not actually address the issue with rising healthcare costs. Instead, it, just kind of tried to assist with helping pay for those rising costs. Mm-hmm. And so the Affordable Care Act, they created the subsidies, which are also called premium tax credits. They operate like a discount. Basically, what happens is the federal government will pay to the insurance company a certain amount of money so that you can more easily afford the health coverage. So you kind of get like a discount, but the money typically goes directly from the government to the insurer, and then the insurer provides you a lower cost premium. The idea is that this would target lower income and middle income folks who may have trouble with these rising healthcare costs and these rising premiums. Unfortunately, when they were actually implemented, healthcare was still too expensive. So a lot of people remained uninsured. They were also what we call underinsured, which means basically you have coverage, but it's not adequate for your healthcare needs. And so in 2021, President Biden signed legislation into law that basically made the subsidies more generous. And they're called the extended or advanced premium tax credits. So they're more generous for folks, and it basically made it more affordable and allowed enrollment in healthcare through the Affordable Care Act to double, more than double, in fact, to 24 million people. So when that was signed into law, that was really just basically for the COVID-19 pandemic to help people access healthcare and health coverage during a time when it was really critical that you had access to that. And the intention was that then they would expire. Unfortunately, I think, or fortunately, however you want to view it, folks really, that is what made a lot of people be able to have access to healthcare. And so without those expanded subsidies, a lot of people will lose healthcare. So that's kind of the background.
And how will this affect Queens? I know we have a lot of freelancers, self-employed people, artists, and small business owners. That's a big part of our community, considering also we have a large immigrant community too. So how does this suspension of these subsidies, how will it affect us in Queens?
Yeah, so just to back up, so the subsidies are set to expire at the end of the year. If they expire, it is projected that about 4 million people nationwide won't be able to afford their coverage. And so people will see premiums in some places double, even triple. In New York's 14th district, premiums should increase for people on the Affordable Care Act by about 47%. So it's a sizable increase for a lot of folks. I think, there is still possibility for Congress to extend these subsidies. Unfortunately, it's not going to happen before the deadline because we are now in recess, so we're not legislating. So it will have to happen in January. But I think it's important for people to, still be familiar with what's happening. If you are uninsured and you think that an Affordable Care Act plan could work for you, then you should go to healthcare.gov. You have until January 15th to enroll in coverage that starts on February 1st. That's when open enrollment will close, is January 15th. But yeah, I think, it is going to be a big cost barrier for a lot of people in our community if we don't extend these tax credits, because people will just be priced out of coverage.
Is it still worth it for people in Queens or people in general to investigate these programs, people that are not insured at this point? And if so, what's the best way to investigate it?
Yeah, I think so, because, I can't speak to what anyone's healthcare needs are, but you never know what's going to happen. You never know what's going to happen. And so it is good to be prepared with some sort of health coverage. And I will say that the subsidies expiring, so I said that it would increase premiums for people who have plans purchased through the Affordable Care Act by 47% on average. So for some people, that may be a smaller increase, and they may still be able to afford coverage through the Affordable Care Act. For some people, it might be a larger increase, and so they might need to search out other options. But I definitely think it is still worth it. And I'm very hopeful that we will extend these because we're supposed to have a vote on it when we come back in session in January.
Good.
Can I sorry, Richard, I just want to add, I don't think I said where to go, but healthcare.gov is where you can find more information. And also just want to put a plug, our constituent services team in the district. If you have questions or unsure how to navigate, you can reach out to us. I'll drop my email in the chat, and I'm happy to see if there's any way that we can kind of answer any questions you may have.
Good. How about from a political standpoint? What are the main obstacles now in Congress, and what has Congresswoman supported in terms of legislation that may alleviate this situation?
Yeah, I think, so just backing up, I think just, the Affordable Care Act in general has kind of been a partisan exercise. It was, passed into law by one party only. Changes to the bill have been championed by one party only. And so I don't know if there's really much bipartisan support, unfortunately, to work on it. I think, though, that there are a lot of folks on the other side of the aisle who are recognizing that 4 million people across the nation could lose healthcare through no fault of their own, so are feeling more compelled to try to, come to the table here. One of the concerns, I think, is fraud in the system, which always can be a concern with a government program, but I think it's really overstated. And then another thing is, this is something that I think has merit. There are some elected officials that don't really like how the Affordable Care Act itself works. So again, as I mentioned at the top, it does not address the rising healthcare costs. Instead, it kind of still subsidizes this for-profit health insurance industry that we have by providing them these federal funds so that they can lower their premiums. And so I think, there are some people who would prefer that we kind of get at the root of the problem and address the inherent rising cost of healthcare rather than continuing to subsidize these health insurance companies. The Congresswoman has talked about this pretty extensively, and I think that her perspective is like she understands that and she agrees and believes we should have universal healthcare and a Medicare for all system. But this is kind of a crisis right now, and we need to address the crisis right now by extending these subsidies so that people who, 4 million people don't lose their health insurance overnight because they can't afford it.
One question for you. If, in fact, this many people lose their health care coverage, that's going to force them into the system, going to emergency rooms, and because you cannot deny people care once they enter the hospital system. Has anybody actually run the numbers and see how the costs of all these 4 million people going to ERs and having to get subsidized care in that way compared to what the cost would be to the government of actually providing them health care, at least on a minimal level?
Yeah, so I don't actually, I'm sure that those numbers have been run. I don't know them off the top of my head. Mm-hmm. I do know that the cost of extending the subsidies is about $30 billion per year. So it's not nothing. And so I think that price tag is impacting a lot of folks. They're a little bit concerned about that. But I do feel hopeful. Someone asked if they think that, what are the chances of this getting passed? I do really feel hopeful that in January, when we come back, that we will have something that passes, because we do have a bill that is going to come to the floor that would have a clean extension of these subsidies for 3 years. And that's something that the Congresswoman has supported. So she's one of the 218 folks who have signed on to this legislation in order to force it to the floor. So I'm hopeful, but it's really unclear.
Yeah, from what I understand, 4 Republicans signed on to that also, and this is why it actually made it to the floor at this point.
Yes, yeah, and I think it just goes to show, I think a lot of folks, we've been hearing from constituents in our office about how this impacts them, and so I think it's just, members are hearing from people in their district and understanding how this is going to impact their constituents. And so, I was really excited to see that we had the 4 Republicans join, and maybe there will be more.
Good. What can our listeners do and people in general do in order to make their feelings known and try and get their elected officials to actually extend these benefits if, in fact, that's what they want to do? Any suggestions on how they should proceed?
So I can't technically speak to that in my official capacity, but I will say what people normally do for our office, which is helpful for us as we're evaluating these policies. We oftentimes have constituents who call us, who email us, who send snail mail, kind of explaining their personal story, why this impacts them, why it's important, how it impacts their family and friends. And we really take those stories and that information very seriously when we make recommendations to the Congresswoman on things that she's going to vote for and support. So that's really helpful for our office. And I would just put a plug out there if there's a policy that, health policy or any other policy that you care deeply about and that you think the Congresswoman should be aware of or something you want her to support, please do reach out to us because it does inform the work that we do here. Mm-hmm. Another plug I'll put in is would love for folks to sign up in the district, for folks to sign up to our newsletter. There's a lot that's been happening this year, especially in the health space. So we try to send out informative newsletters that kind of break down some things that have been happening in Washington, provide updates of like what the Congresswoman has been doing and championing. And then of course, like if we have events in the district, like town halls, we provide that information. So definitely would go to our website and sign up for the newsletter so you can kind of stay up to date.
Good. Has the state or the city advised whether they're going to be able to help at all in case these subsidies disappear? Do you have any indication at this point?
I don't have any indication about that. I will be totally blunt. The state is kind of working through some of the impacts of the One Big Beautiful Bill that will cut nearly $1 trillion from the healthcare system, almost $1 trillion from Medicaid itself. And I think that's going to be kind of a significant lift for the state. So I'm not totally sure where they stand on this issue. And haven't spoken to them about it, unfortunately.
Okay. And one last question on this subject. Do you know of any organizations that can counsel people that just have questions about the different alternatives they have? I mean, there may be insurance where the premiums are lower, but the deductibles may be out of this world. You don't know. I mean, maybe it's feasible for them if they're younger and in good health to have a minimal insurance at this point, just to have some coverage, but be within their budget. So do you know any organizations that are doing this type of work?
So I can refer you. So on healthcare.gov, if you go to healthcare.gov, there is a link for health navigators that can assist you as you're searching for plans. Again, would just say, you can also reach out to our office, like for an individualized case, and we can see if there's anything that we can do, or, if we can point you in the right direction. But would start with healthcare.gov because then from there you can get connected.
Good, thank you. We had an interesting comment here from Lawrence. He says the Urban Institute estimates that additional costs for uncompensated care could be $7 billion higher in 2026. Now, I'm not sure what the net number is compared to the $30 billion that you said that these additional subsidies would cost. But that's a significant number too,
Yeah, that's a significant number. And that's going to, that means that hospitals are kind of going to just have to take on that loss. So could be difficult for some hospitals to be able to do that.
Good. Well, everyone, reach out. Let's see what we can do. I think that personally, speaking for myself, I think that health care is a right, and they say life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Well, I don't think you can have life and happiness without good health. So I think that's inherent in that, and hope we can do all we can to make sure that these cuts are removed. Second part, again, this has a relationship to COVID, and this has to do with telehealth. If everybody probably knows, starting during COVID, you were able to make visits to your doctor via your computer or via the telephone, this telehealth service. From a personal standpoint, I have some disabilities, and it's been a great godsend to me for my healthcare to be able to do this. However, I think it was in the end of October, Medicare and Medicaid would no longer pay for these services. So at that point, everybody was forced to head down to their office, whether it was just to speak to their doctor for 5 minutes. So often, a 2 or 3 hour trip up and back to see a doctor for 5 minutes, not even do a test, was resulting. It was reinstated, but temporarily. It's still going to end at the end of January. So I'd like to discuss that subject with you a little bit. Can you explain what the situation looks like today and
Yes.
more information on expirations and all that?
Yeah. So you mentioned, Richard, that this was like a pandemic era innovation, and actually turned out to be really transformative for a lot of folks trying to get access to healthcare. You mentioned if you have a disability or transportation barriers, or if you're caregiving or working, and you can't take the time out of your day to, the hours that you may need to go to the doctor's office. This has really been really helpful for a lot of people. So this was a pandemic era innovation that allowed you to receive, telehealth visits, audio or audio only, or audio and visual in your home, regardless of where you lived. Congress has understood the importance of this and the importance of access, that how this helps folks access healthcare, and has extended these flexibilities several times. The most recent time was during the continuing resolution that funded the government in November. And so because the government's only funded through the end of January, the telehealth flexibilities have only been extended through the end of January. So come the end of January, if we don't extend them again, then there will be limitations. And so I think the main limitations for people would be that you can't be in your home. So they have originating site limitations. So you wouldn't actually be able to take the visit from your home. It would also be limited to certain parts of the country. So, if you're in a rural area, then you can access telehealth, but other parts of the country would not be able to. There are some limitations on which providers can provide telehealth services that would then go back into place. And then if you're receiving like behavioral health or mental health care, you would be required to have some in-person visits. So this will impact a lot of people and reduce access to care. I feel very strongly that this will get extended again. It has broad bipartisan support across the political spectrum. And so I really do think, and unfortunately for providers and for patients, the can has been kicked down the road, and it hasn't been made permanent, which many people are calling for. So that's made it a little bit complicated. Some people have had to cancel appointments and all of that. But I do feel confident that this will get extended.
Yeah, I was affected by this too, because I did have to cancel a series of appointments when it was first canceled at that point, and then reciprocally, when it was brought back, there were appointments I didn't make because I couldn't make it down there that I could have made. So, from a holistic standpoint, it's just not a very efficient way to run a medical system. But the service itself has been great for me. Do you have an idea why, though? What the political trade-offs are? Why is it still unresolved in Congress? Even though you say there's bipartisan support, it's not translating into permanent advocacy.
I don't know for sure, but I'll just speak like what my gut inkling is. We've had a little bit of difficulty legislating this year. I'll say it like that. And so I think this is just one of the things that has kind of been caught up in that. I think there might be some hesitation to make it permanent because it was meant to just be a COVID-19 pandemic era flexibility. Although we have a lot of folks who are pushing for it. So I think Congress has just kind of like been like, okay, another year, another 2 years, another 6 months. I think there might also be a little bit of a concern with fraud, but I think that's less so than like we see with the Affordable Care Act enhanced premium tax credits. Mm-hmm. But there's a bill out there that would permanently extend these flexibilities that has almost 200 House members, Republican and Democrat, that are co-sponsors, including the Congresswoman, and almost 70 senators, Republican and Democrat, who are also co-sponsors. So I think that there will be some movement.
Good. I know that when this happened, I was told by my doctor that I could have the report, televisit, but it would cost me $200, just for the visit itself.
That's the issue, is that, yes, some
Mhm.
folks, the doctor may, because they're not going to be reimbursed by Medicare, then they may charge the patient. They may just not offer it at all. But either way, that inhibits access, because $200 for one visit is unaffordable for almost anyone.
What can the viewers do now to help support telehealth coverage? And also, I just want to mention that OANA has actually created a petition to that effect. We're going to put the link to that petition in the chat. And if you guys want to sign up for that link, that would be great. We can use all the support we can. Any other avenues, Dory, that you think would be appropriate?
Again, I apologize, Richard. I can't actively say, but I can say what works for us, and I will reiterate that, is contacting our office, letting us know how you feel about this issue, how it impacts you personally, and action that you would like the Congresswoman to take. So I mentioned, I think it's the CONNECT Act is the legislation that would permanently expand the telehealth flexibilities that the Congresswoman is a co-sponsor, and actually based on constituent outreach that we received, that is why the Congresswoman has signed on to that legislation. So that was really effective for us.
Good. Okay, well, thank you so much. And also, everyone, if you go to our website and if you go under op-eds, and you'll find that there is an op-ed that we wrote regarding telehealth. So check that out. Dory, thank you so much for joining us. We greatly appreciate you taking the time out. You've been very articulate and great advocate for the Congresswoman, for our health care. So we really greatly appreciate it. And please come back anytime you have anything new to say, or you think something needs to be updated for our district. We'd greatly appreciate it.
Yeah, of course. Thank you, Richard. And feel free to share my information with folks if they want to reach out about any other issues that they're concerned about, especially as it relates to healthcare.
Okay, if you could put that in the chat, or have Michael put that in the chat, your contact information, that would be great. Okay. All right, thank you. Okay, our next section, we have a neighbor in Astoria in Western Queens that's there. We're staring at it every day, but not really seeing it, and that's Roosevelt Island. Recently, I was reading in the papers that the state signed a new lease with Roosevelt Island, and that lease was also going to include a new planning function. So we thought we would bring this up, and first of all, to get a little bit of the history of Roosevelt Island and how it changed from Blackwell Island to Roosevelt Island, what its different uses have been all over through the years, and its connection here to Western Queens. We'd like to start from the Roosevelt Island Historical Society, he's working with them, Dylan Brown. Hello, Dylan.
Hi, thank you for the introduction, Richard. Yes, hello.
If you could introduce a little bit about yourself, that would be great.
Yeah, of course. So I am currently a graduate student at Hunter College, and that's actually how I got involved with the Roosevelt Island Historical Society through a research paper. I am now working with them as a research assistant on various projects. I just finished a mapping exhibit, which is outside the visitor center by the tram, that looks at the island from 1969 to 2025, and celebrates what is the 50th year of residential occupation of the island. So that's something I've been working on. Beyond that, I do live in Astoria. I love Astoria. I found myself going to Roosevelt Island a lot because Astoria is very sparse with parks. I mean, Astoria Park is great, but I'm over on Broadway, so I just need something a little closer on my bike. But yeah, so that's how I got there.
Good. Okay. Well, listen, we're looking forward to your presentation. Like I say, we all know it's there, but very few of us know their history.
Yes. Okay. So so Roosevelt Island has an extensive amount of history, and I will do my best to try to condense that. So let me know if you can see the screen and everything's good. But so yeah, so here we have Roosevelt Island, so right in the middle, smack dab Manhattan and Queens. And you can see here it is connected directly to Queens and not Manhattan. It actually once was connected to the Queensboro Bridge, which we will talk about in a moment. But let me bring you through the history. So we could talk about its origination. So it was originally known as Hog Island. It was then known as Blackwell Island once Robert Blackwell took ownership. And eventually the city, as it was growing from Lower Manhattan, needed a place to expand to and decided to purchase the island to put institutional uses up on it. So this is around 1828, and it got a steal. It was only $32,000. So the city starts placing its institutions upon the island. So you have the New York City Penitentiary, which is what predated what is now Rikers. The New York City Lunatic Asylum, which Nellie Bly, a famous female journalist, went in and exposed conditions of the people that were there and really reformed how they were cared for. We also had the workhouse. We had the smallpox hospital, which was the first hospital in New York City to be constructed specifically for disease control. And then City Hospital, which was actually a hospital that was made for general like care of all people, regardless of we just talked about healthcare, regardless of income or ability to pay. Um, so you roll into the 20th century, and it is renamed to Welfare Island because of this concentration of institutions. And then in 1930, a vehicle elevator actually opens up between the Queensboro Bridge and the island itself, where you were able to drive onto a platform elevator and be lowered to the island. So there was still no connection at this point. You could also come down as a pedestrian, and there was a trolley over the side of the bridge. So that was how you access the island, if not by ferry at that point. But then they finally connected the island in 1955 with the Welfare Island Bridge, which is a steel span lift bridge. And with that, it was the first connection. Immediately, the trolley line closed. Ferry service would stop 5 years later. And that would be the main access point to the island, which is now tied to Queens, although even though at the time it is still considered a part of the borough of Manhattan to this day. So shortly after the bridge comes in, the island actually goes into a large period of decline. So beautiful, shiny new bridge, but now a lot of abandoned buildings as the city is growing and expanding. You have this decentralization where Elmhurst Hospital is opening up and taking the capacity of the older Metropolitan Hospital. And then these buildings aren't really able to meet modern hospital standards, so they are essentially vacated and abandoned. And this was the time where, the city was, they told the city to drop dead. It's funding crisis, housing crisis we've been in for multiple decades. So the idea of redevelopment comes. And it was Mayor John Lindsay who did that with the Welfare Island Planning and Development Committee, which was created underneath the Urban Development Corporation from Governor Rockefeller. And this was where we're starting to talk about land ownership and a relationship to Queens. The city signed a 99-year land lease with the state. This is a state agency similar to that of Battery Park or Hudson River Park, where they are maintaining, constructing, and operating this land. So 99-year land lease, which Richard just mentioned was extended, which we'll talk about in a little bit. And essentially that, like I just mentioned, it certified that the state would be responsible for all development, construction of the island, all the RFPs, except for two small parcels, which were underneath the existing city hospitals, Kohler and Goldwater. And yeah, so they deliver a plan, which you could see right here, labeled The Island That Nobody Knows. And it was essentially a plan for a walkable neighborhood, unlike any other across the country. It was very actually bold. It relished in historic preservation and ADA access. Actually, the entire island to this day is majority ADA accessible. It was designed with that in mind. Um, Yeah, neighborhood of the future. It also contained, outside of Disney World, the first AVAC trash system, which means that the trash from the buildings was directly dumped into a chute and then through tubes underneath the street into a central location. And that still actually exists today for the original buildings. Of the future buildings currently use sanitation services. Um, and yeah, so that brings you to 1970. Construction begins. Uh, Residents start moving in. Like I said, this year is the 50th anniversary of the first resident moving in to what was then Island House. And then the island slowly comes into its first phase, completing. And then the Urban Development Corporation fails because they default on their bonds. And essentially, the island is in this limbo state where development stalls for a little while, but then private development is brought in to kind of fill those gaps. So a lot of the landmark structures continue to sit. There's a lot of like guerrilla urbanism and gardening. And then the subway station opens up in 1989, 20 years after. So at this point, still the only connection to Manhattan is through the elevator storehouse building, which you can actually see in this photo connected to the Queensboro Bridge. But then also the the Welfare Island Bridge itself. So there was no ferry service, and the service within the elevator storehouse building itself was very limited. And yeah, so now you finally get the subway service, and a bunch of other developments come in the future years. And as you can see here, Northtown Manhattan Park. And essentially, it is now a community of 20,000 uh, residents that are living on Roosevelt Island, where the only access to the island directly by vehicle is the bridge that connects to Queens. And so that kind of leaves us where we are today, which this is a lot of information. I don't expect you to read this, where the island is now looking at its next stage of development, where there are very actually few places to do so, but extending the lease is a part of furthering development. So there is a undeveloped parcel south of Cornell Tech. You have the old power plant, which is owned by New York City Health and Hospitals, which is actually currently beginning the stages of redevelopment. You then have the DEP Water Tunnel number 3 access site. And then you have Kohler Hospital, which is a aging medical facility for long-term care, which is actually within a floodplain and is not right now being considered whether what the options are for future development. And that kind of brings us to today, where I'm going to stop sharing my screen for a moment, where we talk about Queens and its relation to Roosevelt Island being the only direct connection. Um, so the AVAC system, like I mentioned, the trash system takes only a small amount of that trash from the large 20,000 population. It doesn't account for recycling because back then it was recycling wasn't mandated. But then you also have city services that aren't located on the islands. So there is no FDNY, there is no NYPD, because there becomes this complicated ownership of the island, which is maintained by the state. Land is still leased to the state, owned by the city. And the services are coming from the city from Queens. So it creates this who bears the burden of who provides the services, where do the constituents relate to for this island that's in the middle of Queens and Manhattan. And it is very much lumped in with Manhattan and has been since its development for residential use. And yeah, that's kind of where we're at now with the extension of the lease, which that's also a complicated topic, because extending the lease is necessary because it's weird where the buildings that came in after the Urban Development Corporation failed were done so by private developers who were subleased land on the lease from the city to the state, subleased to private developers to build their buildings. So if that lease expires, that brings up a lot of complications on, like, what do I do with my building? You can't just like pick it up and roll it over somewhere else. So it's yeah, it's important that the lease is being extended, but it also opens this conversation of what is the next step for the island. But now I think it's important to also consider what is Queens's, that sounds weird to say, role in this redevelopment or furthering development. Where do we fit in?
Thank you. This is exactly, what led to this whole segment here is that when,
I'm gonna reload my web page again because it's doing the thing. I will be right back.
okay. Okay, while he's gone, again, this is one of the main reasons that we have this segment here because over the years, we've also always felt here in Community District 1, I've been on the community board here for 25 years, and it's always been an issue with us that we're providing most of the services, and but we don't have any elected officials or any actual government oversight coming out of Queens. We think that at a minimum, we're hoping that we're included in this upcoming planning process so that we can have our input. Couple other things just to bring up locally. Right down here in Old Astoria, there's a Greek church at 12th Street and 27th Avenue, and that was the home of the Blackwell family, who originally this was called Blackwell Island. So we do have that connection there. Also, a couple other interesting things too that are going on. We do quite a bit of work with sustainable energy, and one of the more interesting things is that they're generating water power on Roosevelt Island. They have a water wheel right within the river, and I think it's adjacent to a supermarket there or something like that. But I know that they're actually generating power. And it's always been a thought that the Hellgate could be quite a source of power for the city itself. So we'll see what happens. But this is actually
Oh, you're talking about Randall's Island. They just put
no,
that's
uh,
between the Bronx and
no. There's actually no. It's something. There's actually a water wheel on Roosevelt Island too. Okay.
oh, okay.
Okay. And that came up during the sustainability discussions that we were having. So, and also we do have the ferry service there now, which is great.
Yes.
That's made a big difference. And that ferry goes right from Old Astoria right to Roosevelt Island. So that's another connection that from Queens to Roosevelt Island, which is an important connection.
And the tram, which is the tram is super important to the history, which actually the tram was never meant to be a permanent fixture. It was only meant to supplement as transportation between the waiting period of the subway actually opening. But it took 20 years for the subway to open when the MTA said it would actually open. So it stayed. It became a staple of culture, and it continues to this day. It's actually relatively low cost to operate, which is also why it continues to exist to this day. But yeah.
Good. I didn't know that. That's interesting. Huh. Good. So I guess in terms of questions, I mean, first of all, I appreciate your advocacy for Queens. You are a Queens resident, so it makes sense, and greatly appreciate it. And what do you think are the most important historical decisions that shaped how the island was developed? From your research and your studies, what really led to the Roosevelt Island we see today?
I think it was a perfect storm of just, the city was expanding. These buildings are very old. The reason why I was originally using them is because they were putting people there that were, I guess, seemed as less desirable or needed to be controlled in a way where like they were using nature, the East River, to isolate them and do that. And we progressed socially in that time, even though we're kind of regressing now. But we moved towards more holistic care, and then just the size of the city grew exponentially. So we needed decentralized services, where this island was seen as a solution for many different issues. But now we needed that all over in all the 5 boroughs.
Mhm.
So it was a perfect storm of also, politicians that wanted to get things done. So you had John Lindsay and Nelson Rockefeller, who didn't necessarily like each other, even though both Republican Party. Lindsay was seen as more progressive, but Rockefeller wanted to get big building done in his name. So the Urban Development Corporation came in and built a large amount of projects. A lot of Mitchell Lama projects were all
Mhm.
done originally through the Urban Development Corporation,
Mhm.
and it failed ultimately because it wasn't able to repay its bond. So the the instance of getting the housing on the island was what brought it to what we have today, changing that use. Because there were plans actually for a nuclear plant. Robert Moses wanted to put a stadium on the island at one point. It
Mhm.
was considered for full park use. There was like an ecological park. They wanted to put an amusement park.
Mhm.
They wanted to deck over the island with a two-story deck, and then they had like 30-story towers all over it. It was a lot of ideas, but the one that actually happened was this one, and I think it provided a really unique experiment in urban planning. It's very interesting. A lot
Mhm.
of people come from all over the U.S. to see Roosevelt
Mhm.
Island.
I know when I go over there, it is like another world.
Yeah,
So good. Well, thank you so much for this. I greatly appreciate it. And,
of
I
course.
think that our next guest that we bring in is going to be, well, I'd like to hear his take on it, particularly since it sounds like he's inheriting quite a complicated situation. So we're certainly interested in hearing that. That is Nate Gray for the New York City Economic Development Corporation. Dylan, if you want to hang out there, you can hang out there too if you're going to have questions later. But um, Nate, if you could, first of all, thank you for coming. And if
Sure,
you could give us a little background on yourself before we get into the discussion on the upcoming planning. Mhm.
sure. So Dylan's presentation was a perfect prelude to
Mhm.
my short discussion now because it talked about the idea of the lease and the lease extension
Mhm.
as the genesis of what I'm going to talk about now, which um, is that plus an associated planning study. So my name is Nate Gray. I work for the New York City Economic Development Corporation in the Neighborhood Strategies Department. I'm a trained planner. And I've been working at EDC for about 12 years, and I've worked with the City of New York for close to 16. Prior to that, I worked with the New York City Department of Transportation. 2 of those years, I worked for the Queensborough Commissioner, doing community engagement in pretty much Eastern
Oh.
Queens, all the community boards in
Mhm.
Eastern Queens. So I'll talk briefly, and then I can answer
Mhm.
questions that people have about what we're doing. But you've probably seen, and Richard, I know, wrote an op-ed about the press release that came out last month related to two things. The first was the lease extension. Dylan talked about the lease between the city and the state. That was 99 years. That was going to come up in 2068. So the lease was extended for an initial period of 10 years and maybe extended again. That was to give financial certainty to people who were needed to like get a mortgage or refinance their mortgage. They were coming up against a window of time complicated to do that. It presented some uncertainty about the term of that lease. So the lease was extended for a period of 10 years. And then at the same time, there was an announcement that the city would work in partnership with the Roosevelt Island Operating Corporation and New York City Health and Hospitals to plan for the future of two places on the island. The first was Kohler Hospital, which Dylan talked about, is at the northern end by Lighthouse Point, and then what's called the steam plant site. The steam plant is used to provide steam to the island. It's located directly behind the tram on the north side of the Queensboro Bridge. So that site will be redeveloped with housing, and then we will be looking at the future of Kohler Hospital and what could be the associated uses there in that part of the island. So we're going to be starting that work in earnest in the new year. We've done some initial community outreach, first to Kohler's residents and staff, and then a presentation to Community Board 8's Roosevelt Island committee, but we haven't started our master planning work in any amount right now. We're starting that in the new year, and it will take us probably roughly a year to develop the plan and its recommendations. After that, any sense of any entitlements that would be associated with the project would begin following that, and we would go through the general development plan. That was the plan that Dylan talked about during his presentation that guides the development on Roosevelt Island. We would amend that or go through other entitlements to allow for future development on the island, and then any future development or of Kohler. So with that, I would be happy to take any questions. Richard, you're back. I can see you now.
Yes, I am. Sorry, guys. Somehow I lost my signal. Okay, I'm sorry. Okay.
No problem. I think where you may have gone off is at the point at which I said that we're beginning our planning effort in the new year. It will last roughly a year. And then at the end of it, it would culminate in a series of recommendations for the Kohler site. And then we would go through a set of entitlements after that. So with that, I'd be happy to take any questions.
Okay. I have a few questions here. I don't see anything in the chat quite yet, and I want everybody to know, number one, if they have questions, just put them in the chat, and they do appear on our screens here from the with the panelists. One question is, currently, how much affordable housing actually exists on the island? Do you have any idea of if there is any and how much exists at this point?
There is affordable housing on the island. The island was developed, as Dylan mentioned, to have a significant amount of affordable housing on it. If you read the original general development plan, it specifies that the island is a place for affordable housing. It talks about the levels of affordability. So there still remains affordable housing on the island. I'm not sure exactly how much there is, but there is affordable housing on the island.
Is that do you know what happened with the Mitchell-Lama facilities that were there after the Urban Development Corporation? Maybe Dylan, do you happen to know that?
Dylan might know. I don't.
Yeah, so Mitchell Lama, I believe, was
Dylan?
on a. Oh, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you, Dylan.
Good. Okay. So
Yes.
Mitchell Lama is on a 40-year time limit, and after that expires, they are able to break from that. It becomes more complicated when it's renters versus people who are owning condos. But I believe some of the units have already begun to opt out of the affordability. That comes with like a large sale tax and everything. But there was a New York Times article, I believe, last year that went up about one with a view of Manhattan that went for $2 million. So what was originally a very, very affordable, genuinely mixed income neighborhood, which is strange to think it could happen today. It happened in 1975. It is slowly changing because of that.
I'm sorry, I got bumped out again. I don't know what's going on my end. I missed part of that, but
it's okay. The short story is that it is aging out of affordability, and there's an option to keep it. Yeah.
Good. Okay, Nate, I'm assuming that's going to be something that's going to be a big part of your planning process, is trying to reaffirm and create new affordable housing. Is this considered public land then? Because one of the biggest issues we run into in Western Queens is so little public land that it's almost impossible to ever put up any 100% affordable buildings. The numbers just don't work out. Is that something that's a potential for Roosevelt Island?
Sure. So it is city land with the lease to the state, and it would remain that way. One thing we're going to do is we know, like Dylan talked about, the genesis of the one of the projects when it started was around to provide affordable housing because we had an affordable housing crisis. We're in the same situation now. We have to provide housing at any place and at ranges of affordability that we really need to be able to reach, like deep affordability up to market rate. We need to provide housing everywhere is kind of the punchline. So right now, we haven't made a determination about the amount or the depth of affordability, but it will certainly, if there is housing, there will be affordable housing.
Ah, very good.
Dylan, did Richard freeze for you as well, or is that just me?
Yeah, I think Richard's internet is it's a little lagging. Yep. I think he's gonna join back. Mm.
Hi, Richard, you're back now.
Yeah, I'm so sorry. I keep getting bumped out here. I don't know what's going on, but okay. My next question was, again, referring back to the Queen's connection with Roosevelt Island. Can we get any kind of a consideration or have a public hearings based on the planning process within Community District 1 and 2 in Queens? And can we be assured that we're going to have a say in this process, the planning process? This also affects a lot of the decisions that are made in terms of land use here on the waterfront. There's already been some buildings I know that were built with Cornell Tech in mind.
Right.
In terms of office space and laboratories, things like that.
Right. So Richard's referring to the portion of Roosevelt Island that's to the south of the Queensboro Bridge up to the park at the end. It's a site that now is Cornell Techion has developed it with a mixed use program following an RFP that was released during the Bloomberg administration. So there's a research campus, a hotel which is vacant, apartment buildings, and then a park located there. We haven't decided yet on what we're going to do for engagement. So I can't say what exactly we're going to do. Whether there's a public hearing or not. There's certainly what there is going to be is there's going to be a bunch of public meetings. We wouldn't do a project of this scale without doing a significant amount of engagement. And I can tell you from the projects that I've led in the past, we do it in a variety of ways. Engagement is meetings like this, presentations to the community board, public meetings, small group meetings, walking tours. I went out with Judy from the Roosevelt Island Historic Society to walk around, or it was freezing that day, so we didn't walk around, but to get an on the ground feeling of the place. So we'll do all of those things when we start. And we certainly would be happy to come back to the neighborhood association at key points and then be able to hear from you guys directly. We'd be happy to go if you have in-person meetings. So we still have to figure out exactly what we're going to do for engagement, but we certainly would involve as many people as we possibly can. I don't know. I think you might have froze again.
I think he froze again, yeah.
All right, I'll just put that into the comments, I guess. Hey, Richard, did you hear any of that?
I'm so sorry, guys. I don't know what's going on. So given that I'm having so many technical issues, and I don't know that I can stay on much longer, I would just like to end this by saying that I truly hope that you get together with us as an association, but also do outreach to community boards 1 and 2. Maybe we can do an event together, but we would definitely, I would say for sure, we want to have input. We'd also, if possible, like to bring in some of the city agencies like EMS, fire, the 114 precinct, that all right now handle all the responsibilities on the island. So we would ask that, in fact, that you do that. I think that maybe we'll put together some sort of a letter for an official request too.
Okay.
But I hope that I stay online. If I disappear again, I'd like to thank everybody for joining us. I don't see any more messages on here right now, but I look forward to a wonderful relationship with the new Roosevelt Island, and we look forward to having input. And I thank everybody for joining us today. And we will see each other in February, where we're planning on having an exciting event to be announced very soon, but I think everybody will be very interested in it. Again, I'd like to thank Nate Gray from the EDC. I'd like to Dylan Brown from the Roosevelt Island Historical Society, and Dora Finney. I see Dora has stayed with us. Hi, Dora. And from the office of Congresswoman Ocasio-Cortez. We thank everybody for joining us. Have a wonderful holiday, and we'll see everybody soon. Thank you.
Thank you, Richard. Have a good night, everybody.
Thank you.